Hi, I'm Madeline Newsom.
And I'm Elijah Rice.
And we're here today to report human trafficking not only on the global level, but also here in our community. As a part of our project, we went out around UNCG and asked students what they specifically thought about human trafficking here in our community. And the answers we came up with were, what do you think of human trafficking here in our community?
Well, I did my senior exit 4 years ago on human trafficking, so I don't know as much anymore, but I do know that it's a lot more prevalent than we actually think, and I know at the furniture market a couple months ago, it was like a big hub for human trafficking.
What do you think of human trafficking here in our community?
I don't care for it. It should be against the law. Like, if you're caught, you should be executed.
What do you think of human trafficking here in our community?
I just would never believe it goes on in our community.
Eli, what is human trafficking?
Human trafficking is a modern-day form of slavery involving the illegal trade of people for exploitation or commercial gain. Human trafficking is a hidden crime as victims rarely come forward to seek help because of language barriers, fear of traffickers, and/or fear of law enforcement.
Human trafficking is defined in the Trafficking Protocol as the recruitment, transport, transfer, harboring, or receipt of a person such as means as threat of use of force or other forms of abduction, fraud, or deception for the purpose of exploitation.
The definition of trafficking consists of three core elements. The action of trafficking, which means the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons. The means of trafficking, which includes threat of or use of force, deception, coercion, abuse of power, or position of vulnerability. And finally, the purpose of trafficking is, as always, exploitation. In the words of the Trafficking Protocol, Article 3, exploitation shall include, at a minimum, the exploitation of the prostitution of others or other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs.
In short, human trafficking is the illegal trade of humans against their will for purpose of sexual exploitation, forced labor, or modern-day slavery.
So Maddie, who are the victims and culprits of human trafficking?
Victims of trafficking can actually be any age or any gender. However, a disproportionate number of women are involved in human trafficking both as victims and as culprits. Female offenders have a prominent role in human trafficking, particularly where former victims become perpetrators as means of escaping their own discrimination. Most trafficking is carried out by people whose nationality is the same as those of the victims. So Eli, who traffics these human beings?
Well, there's no one particular stereotype of the person who sells these human beings. These criminals do not discriminate against gender, race, or physical appearance. Men are typically the thought of predominant leader of trafficking. However, women are commonly selling and buying humans and acting as the middleman for these illegal trades.
Human trafficking can really happen anywhere, but since we are mainly focusing on human trafficking here in Greensboro, we have a few statistics. 80% of those who are trafficked are females, and 50% of those victims are under the age of 18. 300,000 kids are trafficked each year, and the traffickers who traffic these children are 70% male, but there are also females in the industry.
Potato.
The four biggest trafficking states is New York, California, Nevada, and Texas. And the three most common forms is 1, there's a pimp street prostitution, 2, commercial brothels, and 3, escort services. It's a $32 billion industry, and last year they made more than Nike, Google, and Starbucks combined. So Elijah, what happens to these victims after they're trafficked?
46% of people are forced into prostitution. 27% of people are forced into domestic servitude. 12% of people are forced into miscellaneous activities. 10% of people are forced into agriculture. And 5% of people are forced into factory labor.
14,500 to 17,500 estimated number of people are trafficked into the United States annually. 50% of the people trafficked into the United States are children. 800,000 of people are trafficked worldwide each year, And East Asia and the Pacific is the region with the largest source of people who are trafficked into the U.S. each year. They're given hope of a better life in America, and it turns out they're being used into forced slavery or sexual abuse. Some quick facts about human trafficking that most people are unaware of is the average cost for a slave around the world is only $90. Trafficking primarily involves exploitation, which comes from many forms, including forcing victims into prostitution, subjecting victims into slavery or involuntary servitude, compelling victims to commit sexual acts for the purposes of creating pornography, misleading victims into debt bondage, and according to some estimates, approximately 80% of trafficking involves sexual exploitation and 19% involves labor exploitation. There are three main elements that make up human trafficking. There's the act, the means, and the purpose. The act is the recruitment, the transport, the transfer, the harboring, and the receipt of humans. The means is the threat or the use of force, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power and vulnerability, giving payments or benefits. And the purpose is the exploitation, including prostitution, sexual exploitation, forced labor, and slavery or similar practices, removal of organs, or other types of exploitation. And altogether, those three elements create human trafficking.
This trade is majorly based off of a supply and demand system. If there is no demand for pornography or real humans being trafficked, then there would be no industry for these traders to get involved with. It is our job to bring awareness to the issue. Many people refuse to believe such a crime happens right in our very own community. We need to stop this supply and demand. Stop pornography. The people of today need to nurture and teach their kids the harmful effects of the pornography and human trafficking industries.